Are you still on that Game of Thrones hype, House of the Dragon? I have some recommendations for you. These books are like Game of Thrones, but nothing is truly going to be exactly like Game of Thrones. So, let me start off with the closest one to Game of Thrones, and that is going to be the Dantelina Dynasty. Honest to God, the Grace of Kings is so many POVs. This spanned like decades in this book, and I've heard this book is more textbooky than like the other books, but I've only read book one, but it's still on this list. This is like Game of Thrones, and holy fucking shit, it is just so expansive. There's wars going on, there's betrayals, there's political intrigue coming, there's so much. The women in this, the women, honest, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And if you love Game of Thrones, I urge you to try this because I really think you would enjoy it. I've heard a lot of people request The Darkness That Comes Before as a fans of Game of Thrones. I've read part of it on audio. I do kind of agree, but I do get more Malazan vibes from this than I do Game of Thrones. But a lot of people do recommend it. It's very political. There's a holy war coming on. There's a lot of political machinations of what I have read of this book. So I am putting it out there. It is there. I may change my mind, but so far, what I've read, I can see how a lot of Game of Thrones fans would enjoy this. The elephant in the room. Obviously, First Law. Joe Abercrombie, Lord Grimdark himself, is just amazing political stuff. Fans of it will like it. It's not told in the same like narrative style, but it's definitely very grim. Fans will definitely like the First Law. Does it give me the same exact vibes as like Game of Thrones? Not quite, because it's not as kind of medieval as I'd like it, because it's set in like a different time. But I still enjoyed it. I do still recommend them. The biggest one out of this, the biggest one, is Sons of Darkness. This is if like First Law and Game of Thrones had a baby. It has Game of Thrones moments. It is told in a different narrative style than what you may expect. But honest to God, Sons of Darkness, it's hard to explain. It's also like a retelling on like the Matabata poem, and the prologue will have you hooked. Like, do trust in the author. Trust in Gaurav, man. Trust in him that he can lead you through this, because holy shit, it's a slow build. Very slow build, very learning the politics. Then you learn stuff about the war. And then obviously there's some creatures that come up to it. Then you have, honestly, one of the women in this go through so much, and she's so bent on revenge. Like, she reminds me of Arya, like so much so. And like her storyline, holy shit. But then women fighters. Women fighters. Who doesn't like women wielding swords? Who doesn't? It's everything. It's just really artfully done, artfully told. Highly recommend this book, because holy shit. I mean, it has its own like house sigils in a sense, things that go on, opposing people. It's not as big and expansive as Game of Thrones, but it's probably the most out of the storytelling you are going to get with the political intrigue to Game of Thrones. Yes, this is medieval. There's some politics, but it's not grimdark. Again, love John Gwynne, but this very much is Game of Thrones. Massive cast of characters. There's a war going on. A war is happening, but it's build up to a prophecy. And don't let that dissuade you, because John Gwynne loves to play with tropes. And sometimes he flips tropes on your head. Sometimes he just twists them around and just switches genders or something like that. Just makes them a little bit different. Makes them really, really fresh. He did this. The fan family in this, fucking incredible. If it has a fan family, I will read it and love it. Incredible fan family. Adored adored the wolven in this. The creatures. You can ride a pet bear, like a pet bear. A big fucking grizzly bear claws will eat you bear. There's giants riding bears. It's everything about this is amazing. It's very Viking centered, very Norse. But the moments in this, the brutality, how he treats the characters, how you learn as you go through the books that, like with George R. R. Martin, no character is safe, because he could just flip them kill them off, destroy them at a moment's notice. And honest to God, and Maquin has got to be my favourite storyline through this. Also the most traumatic. But there's also people, like POVs in this that you hate so much. Like, so much that you just want to pull the character out and bitch slap them yourself. Obviously, The Faithful and the Fallen is the most like it. There is obviously a Blood and Bone, which is a spin-off from, well, it's like set like 100 years after The Faithful and the Fallen. That is not as like Game of Thrones as this is. It's obviously, it's still the same world, but this had more POVs, this had more like higher stakes and stuff going on, where the other one just doesn't, but it's still a good read. I fucking loved it. Now, this one is kind of on my list, kinda, because the way I describe this is Aragon cross Game of Thrones, and this is lightly Game of Thrones. Like, there are some Game of Thrones moments in this, but it's very loosely based of Game of Thrones. Again, it's a good take on dragon riding. It's probably more like Aragon than it is Game of Thrones, but there are some darker moments in this. So it's like if Aragon was dark, more so. But there are some, you know, Game of Thrones moments in this. But again, I still think if you're a fan, you'd like it. Just don't go expecting it to be like completely like Game of Thrones. It is just very similarly like Game of Thrones. My other one I'm going to mention is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. Now, this is only here because of this has the same brutality as Game of Thrones. It's very grim. A lot of stuff happens. I did find the ending to the series was rushed, but overall I enjoyed it, and I definitely think you will too. I'm in such a Game of Thrones mood, and my hunt for finding things like Game of Thrones hasn't quite tickled that itch yet. But these are the books that I've found that I've enjoyed on my hunt for Game of Thrones like books. So if you have any recommendations, please put them down below, because I need them. I need them. Like, House of the Dragon has got me thirsting for more Game of Thrones. I love that grittiness. I love the way it's told. Like, everything, but again, at the same time, is anything at the top Game of Thrones? Probably the fuck not. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Drop your recommendations back down below, and happy reading.